Sounds good.
Hello, everybody. Welcome to another episode of the Tigers Minor League Report recap. Usually I play the video, but for whatever reason I froze and like deer headlights and forgot to do the intro this week. But it's quite all right. I think it's because we're watching the Tigers game. It is now going to the bottom of the sixth. Tigers trail 2-1 in Kansas City as Michael Wacha's. We've been watching Michael Wacha's change up, do some beautiful things. I mean, that thing's got some tumbling action, especially against lefties. And he can throw it at will. I'm Rohelic Song Sammy is Chris Brown. Brady Day should be joining us promptly. And so, but before we get to the show, I just wanted to say if you want, you can find us on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or listen to the podcast, and over on Twitter at Tigers ML Reports. So please make sure you follow us on Twitter. We're getting closer to our goal. And now we're part of the Believe Network. So, and please, if you subscribe to us on Spotify, iTunes, leave us a review. It goes a long way. And also, we have a donation link, too, that we have playing right down the bottom here. So this weekend, I'm hoping to go out to Erie this weekend for a day. And the next weekend is the West Michigan comes home. So we're going to be hitting the road pretty hard here in the next couple of weeks as summer kicks off officially. And so one last time I note, too, MLB's doing something really cool for those who are suffering with, because May is mental health awareness, and they're partnering with the crisis text line. So it's a free 24-hour, 24/7 confidential text-based mental health service. And if you're experiencing feelings of loneliness, sadness, or being overwhelmed, you're not alone. You can text MLB to 741-741 to reach the volunteer crisis counsel at the crisis text line, or you can connect via web chat at crisistextline.org. And I'm not being endorsed by that. As somebody who's suffering from mental health myself, always reach out. There's always some sort of resource for it. And yeah, I mean, depression runs in our family. I suffer from it. It sucks. And I don't really talk about it because really nobody's business. But I mean, at the same time, there's resources for people to get help out there. So there you go.
Yeah, it's important. Take care of your mental health.
Yes.
And don't be afraid or feel embarrassed or whatever. I know it's tough. I was going through I had some rough weeks here lately. And yeah, it's nice to know that those resources are there. And then it's also nice to know that things do get better. So just stick with it. And then if you need a gentle distraction, just listen to some podcasts about minor league baseball.
Yeah. Or yeah, we'll talk about the major league team a little bit too. Last night, the Motor City Metrics, Chris and Mike and Uper talked a little bit about the series of Arizona. And we'll talk a little bit about the Tigers too, a little bit. There's a couple things because they're playing Toronto weekend, which I always like when Toronto comes to town. It's always a cool thing for that to happen. And I believe the Pirates are going to come in for Memorial Day, I believe. So that's going to be Paul Skeen versus Derek Scuba will line up on Tuesday if everything continues to line up the way it does. So that'll be cool. That'll be really good. I'm actually going to go out to that game. So
yeah, I mean, I think they're currently saying it's going to be Skubal and Jones, and then Skeens and Flaherty. Either way, it looks like the Tigers are going to get two of the best young pitchers in the National League. So that's good and bad, obviously, but should be fun for sure. And yeah, I was talking about the Blue Jays, how they, the Canadian fans overrun the stadium and are always booing. It's a different atmosphere down there when the Blue Jays come to town.
Yeah, they're very. If there's one thing about Toronto fans, even their minor league, there's people that make a point to go to minor league, spend their whole summer going to minor league games, affiliates and everything too. There's a couple of people I met when the Blue Jays were out at the affiliate with the Lugnuts affiliate. So that was every summer I went out to Lansing, and we had Blue Jay fans that said, "Oh yeah, I plan my vacation around this," and it sounds like the most normal thing in the world. So. Clay, good to see you. Clay Soden from justbaseball.com. They just did an interview with Jackson Jobe. You can check out on their website. Just want to give them a plug and give them a shout out because Clay's always pushing us up. So I really appreciate it.
The call up podcast, right?
Yeah, just the call up podcast. And so and I think Clay's coming to town this weekend too. So I'm trying to see if I can maybe Sunday or something along those lines get him some actual good Mexican food or some good food prepared in Detroit. So there's some. It depends on what he's looking for. As my hands were going, I wanted to go to Louisville real bad, but it's not in the cards right now. But I do want to go eventually see a Bats game down there at some point. So
it was a rough weekend in Louisville. People getting arrested all over the place.
Oh, really?
I don't know. That's where the Scotty Scheffler thing went down, right?
Yeah, that's right. Oh, yeah, that's right. I forgot about that. Yeah,
no.
the whole the pro golfer thing. That was
one of the better meme events of the year.
Yeah, not as good as probably one of the best pieces of audio we have acquired in quite some time from the NBA, courtesy of Karl Anthony Towns.
Oh, how much more we gotta lose?
Yeah, how much you want us to lose?
We're losing for 20 years.
Yeah, there you go.
Yeah.
That's Tigers fans mantra too.
Yeah, that's the Tigers mantra right here in a nutshell. I'm gonna play it one more time.
Oh, how much more we gotta lose?
Yeah, how much you want us to lose?
We're losing for 20 years.
My favorite part about that drop too is the guy laughing hysterically in the background.
That's Anthony Edwards, I think. Yeah,
is it Anthony Edwards laughing in the background? Because that's fantastic. That's just great. So, but yeah, so we have our top 30. So we're gonna talk about that. I think we should start with that. I don't know, Chris. We can start.
Yeah.
Well, that was a nice pitch there by Wentz. He just got Silver Perez. Oh yeah, there's old BK and Samuel. I was gonna say, don't be saying anything, but we have a pretty good Canadian fan base here, so I'm not gonna go and disparage all that. But no, our top 30 list is out, and yeah, you know what, Chris? Let's just start there. We'll start there. We can quickly split
the pod in two if we need to, right?
Yeah, we'll split the pod in two. There we go. So yeah. There's a nice comment in there about Cole Keefe's lack of extra bases is starting to defy possibility. His last 3 hits have been over 105 miles an hour. That goes back to Arizona. So
I get it. It is kind of weird that his ISO is like 0.015 or whatever. But it's coming. It's like you can see he's making the harder contact. He's getting his hits now. The extra base hits will start coming after that. And I think he's going to end up having close to the rookie season than we expected. It's just, we always talk about this, man. Like he always made the adjustments that he needed to. He changed to a toe tap to get his timing down. He's always done things like this to figure it out. And the big leagues is a huge jump. And so it just took him a while. And it's going to take him, there'll probably be some more ups and downs. We see, Kerry Carpenter went through a slump. He's back to crushing the ball. Riley Green's in a bit of a slump right now. It happens to really good big league hitters too. And so, yeah, I'm not too worried about Colt Keith still. I think, he's got the strikeout rate is like 17%, which is kind of wild these days, especially for a rookie. So he's doing a lot of good things, and I think the power will come soon.
Yeah, there was playing in terms of like where he was playing at a different ballpark. I think he had like 6 home runs at Dodger Stadium or something like that. So I saw some ridiculous, something like that, or along those lines. But in terms of the Skubal trade talk, that's just, by the way, somebody in our chat saying, please tell me that the Skubal trade talk is just BS. They need to sign this guy long term. It is just BS. It's just I heard anything or go ahead, Chris.
No, and it's absolutely. We've discussed it many times before. It's like we talked about it all offseason. If you're going to make a trade to get an impact bat, you're going to have to give up something. And Skubal's their best pitcher, and one of the best pitchers in baseball. So it's an interesting thought exercise. But the Tigers aren't seriously considering trading him right now. They would. I don't know. They'd have to be absolutely blown away by a deal, and they'd probably have to be losing 30 of their next 40 games.
Yeah, that's just absurd. We do have a video compilation with this all too, so I will probably play. The reason why I didn't want to play the video at first is because the second half of the video, from 20 to 10. I'm sorry, from 20 to 1. There was no audio for it, so I still haven't finished doing the last part of it. But either way, we have the list right here, and we'll start at number 30 with Brett Callahan. And so, Chris, you want to tell the folks how we came up with their new top 30?
Yeah, so it's the same sort of process we've used the last 4 or 5 lists we made. Some of the people involved change, but we basically put it out to everybody in our Tigers minor league report chat group. Hey, everybody do their own individual top 40 list, and then we will then combine them all and rank them all, and then come up with a top 30. And that's what we did. It was Rogelio, myself, Jerry, Colin, and Jaden all did top 40 lists. And this was the result. And we ended up with 35 players who were on at least 3 lists and 31 who were on at least 4 lists. So we kind of went with that one. So there were a couple players who were on 3 lists that would have been ranked on this, but we just kind of left them off because, if you've got more of a consensus, you might as well go with that. So that's how it worked. And, it's like any collaborative process like this. I'm sure that there are a couple players that I wanted on the list that didn't make it, and a couple players that I, didn't have on my top 30 that made it. And I'm sure that's the way for all 5 of us. But I think we ended up with a really good consensus list. The system itself, we can go for the 10,000 foot view here. There's only been a couple players who graduated, but it feels a bit lighter now, in part because Colt Keith was our number 1 prospect. He's gone now. Parker Meadows, he was our number 4 prospect. I think he's gone now. And Winsel Perez isn't technically graduated yet, but we decided that he will be soon enough. So we just left him off. And then this is sort of the same thing with Ryan Kreidler again. He's technically still a prospect. He made 3 lists, but didn't make 4, so we left him off. So there's room for a lot of new faces here, and in the depth of the system gets a little interesting after, I don't know, 15 or so. It's kind of like, choose your own adventure. Which player do you like more than the other one? And and honestly, we do the lists I think 3 times a year now. I think we update usually in May, and then I think in July or early August after the draft, and then we do one in November, December. And I think the May one is usually, I don't mean to say this, we put the same amount of effort and all, but I don't think the May one is our best list, because a lot of it is based on the first 5-6 weeks of the season, right? We're like, hey, this guy seems to be breaking out, this guy's struggling. And then what happens, and you can look back last year, the first list, I don't think we had Gibson Long on it. I don't think we had Bigby on it, right? And
Correct,
then by the time we did the next list, both those guys were in the top 15 because there's another 3 months to go or whatever. So, but the whole point of these is always to just capture what we think of the system right now at this specific point in time. And this is our May list, and we're proud of it. And there you go.
And here's the thing too. You're right about that. It just does capture in time, because on my list, for example, I put Andrew Navigato on mine because I felt like we haven't really, as far as trying to give him his due. We haven't really given him his. I mean, he has been the last couple of years. He's been a consistent force. And looking at some of the more batted ball data, Navigato's done pretty well. It's just, I mean, for his age, unfortunately, it is what it is. And I think in a different set of circumstances, perhaps if he didn't lose a year to COVID or anything, who knows? I don't know. But I will say this, that is exactly what you're talking about, Chris. I mean, right here, would we have him on the list last year at all? No. I mean, he turned it on late last year. I mean, I don't want to say late last year. He was consistent last year, but we just didn't. We saw it as, well, maybe it's just because he's an older guy and all that, and he's just a guy in the system, and a guy who I think that Brandon Day would have a strong opinion on too. Navigato doesn't. I want to entertain that he's a 4A player. Is he a prospect? He's in that weird category. So that would be an example of capturing a prospect in time, right, Chris? I mean.
Yeah. It's some of it is we just haven't seen the guys break out yet. Like, there are players that right now are still finding their footing, and then 2 months from now we'll be like, oh God, they performed for the last 2 months, and this is legit, and we're seeing some real progress. And other of it is Navigato is a guy that has been kind of an organizational player, that he's played just about everywhere, position wise, and he's hit fairly well. I always thought that it was going to be kind of like breaking ball recognition that would do him in, but he's gone up to AAA now and hitting. And, I mean, just a step away from the big leagues. If something happens, it's tough to say he's a prospect to me. But again, like once you get past the 15 point in the system right now, it's anybody's guess as to who's the actual prospect. To be honest.
Yeah, I don't know, Brandon. I mean, I know your list might be totally different from ours, but that when I look at the numbers, here's where I think between 20 to 30, our list can be very interchangeable. And the one name, the name that I'm surprised still on there, honestly, was Christian Santana, because I know based off his potential, I know you have to look at the numbers. You can't look beyond the numbers a little bit, but I'm surprised that Santana just survived. You have Cole Turney, who's, again, is he a prospect? I don't know. But then you have, like, for example, I was high on some of the Latin kids, like Salas from Farmbar, and even like Rainer Castillo is you can put him in some consideration too. But Santana's survived it all, and even Dickerson. Like Dickerson, I haven't seen him pitch, but I don't know. That one also kind of perplexed me a little bit, and so. Sean, welcome to the Tigers or chat this evening, and hopefully you did not make please do not drink that Clorox milkshake. It's bad news.
I didn't realize that Joey Wentz reverted to last year starting Joey Wentz, and the game was basically over. But yeah, Brandon, I don't know. We had just started to kind of talk about our process for the top 30. We haven't actually gotten to the names yet.
Yeah, it's it's always interesting. There's like the guys who, I mean, you're always kind of torn between the guys who performed somewhat and then the guys whose skills you look at and think like, okay, this is still workable. And I mean, Santana kind of falls in that category. Obviously, there's a lot to be done, but a middle infielder to some degree who hits for power when he makes enough contact and who has pretty good plate discipline. Is it that against Andrew Navigato, who's actually hitting at AAA? I'd still take Santana, to be honest, because, I just think, at his age, there's still a lot more hope that he can actually turn into a legit major leaguer, whereas Navigato, has performed somewhat, but you still look at him striking out, almost 30% of the time in AAA and figure like, he's a guy you might catch for a little bit of a hot streak, but isn't someone who looks like he's going to like actually develop much further into a big leaguer. So there's always that balance between, overestimating or underestimating skills versus actual performance. But I probably wouldn't have Navigato in there too. And I probably still would have Santana sneaking in there somewhere in the 20s. But yeah, once you get past that, that range of like, okay, these guys are the obvious good ones. Yeah, there's always some middle ground, with the guys beyond 20. We went to 35 this year just for that same reason, because there's a couple of guys who I at least want to mention, who are interesting. But yeah, it becomes a little bit of a leap of faith when you get to that far down the list, where it's just like, who do you feel like actually has a little bit of upside? And also, I should say that I've been waiting for Joey Wentz to blow up, for 6 weeks now, so it's about time.
Yeah.
He's actually done well. I mean, no shade on Joey. It's just, you always know there's something lurking there. So, yeah.
Yeah, I would just say, like, Santana, for me, I think I had him 30th on my list. And is that where he ended up? There's a handful of guys in the system. Santana, Pacheco, Campos, Workman to a certain extent, Peyton Graham, like all these guys, you hold on to some hope because of the draft pedigree or bonus pedigree, but none of them are really performing. I mean, yeah. So it's like, yeah, do you put guys in who are performing, or do you put the guys in there that might have the tools to perform one day? It's always a balance.
Yeah. I mean, there's just a juggling act that has to be done there where, some guys you're going to like, you just naturally are going to like them more. And sometimes you just hang on too long. Santana might be a guy that, I've hung on to too long. I might hang on to Peyton Graham a little bit too long this summer too. He hit a home run yesterday and I was just like, okay, here we go.
He had a great week.
Yeah.
We'll see that in our slides later, but
yeah, Peyton Graham's not hitting for any power. Like, is he going to? That with each guy, you've got to kind of hone down to like what the specific question is. Like, he obviously has enough, strike zone discipline, but does he have the pitch recognition and the ability to drive the ball? We haven't seen it. I hoped it was there, but we haven't seen him make any of those kind of adjustments. And when the guy is making those adjustments, like you were saying when I came on, then it's, how much of this do I need to see, before before I get too excited. And usually 6 weeks isn't necessarily enough unless it's like a crystal clear, like, okay, this guy's leveled up. Colt Keith, in the spring of 2022 kind of leveled up, that kind of a thing. Sometimes it's obvious. Other times you're taking a bit of a leap for sure.
Yeah, I mean, like for example, in terms of Gage Workman too, like he's on our list. He's at number 23. Yeah, did he? I mean, in terms of this week, I don't know what it is about playing. Maybe because in terms of Harrisburg, I don't know. Harrisburg's really good this year. So, yeah. But he did come back down. I mean, he did have a multi-hit game on the 15th, but then it was just kind of slow steady after that. But here's the thing: if there's one encouraging thing, except for yesterday where he struck out 3 times. As soon as I said, I'm like, well, yesterday he went back to his old ways, but still, I'm not. Workman deserved to be up there because he has made that improvement, and it's just, and not everybody's gonna hit 400 all week or all the time either. But another name too that came up really quickly was Carson Rucker, who is, correct me if I'm wrong, Chris, he's still injured, correct?
Yeah, I believe he went on the IL last week. He hasn't come back yet.
Yeah. And it fits in the philosophy of what the Tigers have been doing lately, which is drafting high school guys, high school bats, which is something that we're still getting used to. But Rucker hitting the list, I mean, he hit Complex League pretty hard last year, made waste of it pretty quickly. And if it wasn't for the injury and the surplus of infielders right now in Lakeland, I think he'd probably be in Lakeland right now.
Yeah. And another guy who you like what you see out of the raw ability, obviously there's so far to go, but yeah, I mean, you've got him, he's 19, he's got power, not a shortstop probably, but an infielder who can hit for power at that age. There's plenty that you could project there, in his frame and his swing. So there's another question that comes down to, how much do you trust the organization? And that's another thing I struggle with a lot, because I can get real cocky with pitchers right now. But you still have a lot of kind of bad feeling about, are the Tigers gonna improve this guy's swing and approach? It's not their bread and butter. And even though we've seen a few more examples in recent years, even those have been a struggle. Wenzel was a struggle. Kerry Carpenter kind of came out of nowhere and just did his thing and was right there. But you still don't have that many examples of like steady progress. And this guy's a bona fide major leaguer right away. Even Keith obviously hasn't hit the ground running.
Yeah, that's a good point, Brandon. I mean, if you look at the way the Tigers have not been able to develop hitting at all in the last, I mean, dare I say, decade plus. I mean, it's been a long time where the Tigers have been able to say, okay, in terms of like, a guy that could be something relatively quickly, or just it's just going to be either that or organizational fodder. Stan goes, why are you guys always so quick to determine a pitcher? Could be only reliever. Shortstop could never play shortstop in the majors. Why the heck do the Tigers draft shortstops?
They don't usually.
No.
Yeah, that's kind of a problem. And if they do, they're young, and everybody's a shortstop when they're 17, 18 for the most part. Anybody good.
Well, yeah, I mean, I think it's just through experience that seeing that most guys who start as a shortstop don't end as a shortstop. Most guys who start as a starter don't end as a starter. It's a hard thing. A lot of guys get pushed to the bullpen. It's just the way it is, and unfortunately, center fielders end up in the corner or at first base or whatever. Like, it happens. It's just the way it goes.
Yeah. So unless your tools are outstanding defensively, that you can actually buy them as a shortstop in the major leagues or a center fielder in the major leagues, there's always like where is this gonna detour to as he gets into the upper minors? And the competition is a lot tougher. So yeah, that's just kind of a standard like adjustment that you make with almost everybody.
I mean, look at Fernando Tatis, for example. Anybody tell me that Fernando Tatis Jr. would be a plus defensive right fielder after being hyped as one of the best shortstop prospects in a long time, I would have told you you're nuts. And look at him. I mean, he's very good in right field. And Winfield Perez is playing center field on a pretty good. I mean, he is, in terms of as far as like playing his position well. Stan said, so you're saying there's no development in the minor leagues for any of these positions. We're not saying that. What happens is that either they grow into something else. Like you look at Winfield Perez. Okay, I'll give you a prime example of that. When we saw him when he first came up to West Michigan in 2018, and he was a skinny little kid who just slapped the ball around the infield. He's groomed himself into a well-built athlete with speed. I mean, he had speed before, but he was just a slap hitter. Now he started hitting the ball with air. With air, he started getting more into that. In the infield, he can't play the infield. He just can't do it for whatever reason. He has a yips, whatever the case is. And the Tigers were able to put him in. Like, I give the Tigers at least the development track to go, hey, they made him into a major league player in that regard.
Yeah,
So,
they had to find a way. It wasn't
Yeah.
like it was an obvious role for him ever.
Yeah, and it was he started as a shortstop, and then it was mostly shortstop and third base, and then it was mostly second base, and then it was outfield and second base, and now it's mostly outfield, if not exclusively outfield. And it's not that they didn't give him chances and they weren't trying to develop him there. It just wasn't working. And sometimes it's just somebody's just better than you. Like Kevin McGonigal so far has looked completely fine at shortstop. I don't know that he's going to be a shortstop at the big league level because there's probably going to be somebody who's just a better defender there. It's just the way it is. Like, if you have Kevin McGonigal or Javi Baez playing shortstop, you're probably going to play Javi Baez at shortstop, even if he's not hitting, because he's a better defender. Now, maybe that's not the best example in the world because Javi has, hit pretty poorly, but it's that's one of the things you have to consider is that even if you're playing a premium position right now, if you don't have like those rare tools that make you a plus defender at that position, then you're going to get moved off. Like, you just think of Riley Green, right? Riley Green was perfectly fine as a center fielder. It was always a little bit iffy, he was having to die for everything, and he gets moved to a corner where he's great because Parker Meadows is just faster and better. And now Winsel Perez is playing there and everybody else is playing there, but I don't know. It's not that you're not developing these guys. It's sometimes there are limits to your physical ability.
Yeah, I mean, it just comes down to, watching the player. Like, is it because they're, Winsel Perez had all this trouble, throwing to first base? I mean, that's all it really came down to. It's not like his hands were terrible. So you just have to balance those things. Like, in the raw ability, Winsel Perez probably could be a shortstop. Like, he's got, arguably enough arm to play there. He's got the foot speed. He's quick, all that sort of thing. But then you watch it and it's just never come along. And, if someone's going to be a major league shortstop, and it's usually pretty obvious that this is a really, really good defender. There isn't that much question about it. It's the guys like, Navigado, like Workman at shortstop. Workman is better than Navigado at shortstop, but is Workman a major league shortstop? And I don't think any of us are like completely sold on that. Like, he could probably be okay there if he hit enough. But then, and then you get that calculation, and then it's like, okay, well, how much is he going to hit, and how much do those two things balance together? So there's just, it's not a science, that's for sure. Not for us. Maybe in the computer banks of various player development systems it is, but you're just trying to kind of balance those two things. Like, what physically is this guy capable of doing, and when you actually watch him play a lot, how does it actually play out? Does he make mistakes? Does he show those skills? Does he show those instincts? And is he getting better as the years go by? But if a guy's not like, pretty damn quick and with a big arm, they're not going to, it's not like they're going to put him in the bullpen or something and develop his arm enough to play shortstop, over time. Like, there's just limits to what a guy can do. And so you try to establish, like, what is the floor? What is the ceiling of his skills? What is the floor? What is the ceiling of how he's actually performing and developing on the field? But it's all still, kind of taking a scientific wild ass guess, the old swag, as they say, to figure out, where it's going to go. If I knew, I'd probably be working for a team.
Yeah.
but they don't know either. And you see them experiment all the time because they don't know either. There's no answer. It's real life. You just have to see how it plays out to some degree.
Yeah, I mean, in the reverse, the kind of the funny example is Mookie Betts, right? Who came up as a second baseman, was an outstanding second baseman, got moved to right field, was an outstanding right fielder, and then they moved him to shortstop, and he's holding his own there. It's like, what? That's not how it's supposed to work at all. But
did the Red Sox screw up by not developing him as a shortstop?
Possibly, yes.
I look at, we've asked about the Tigers, how they developed players in the past, and like I said, some of the players just say they told us to just do our thing, and others now there's certain things that they're responsible for working on, whether getting the ball in the air or whatever the case is. But as far as the reason why the Tigers have struggled with development in terms of hitting wise too, is that they haven't drafted well either. I mean, it has been as far as like in the later rounds go, I mean, it's easy to get the first 2 rounds, right? But even then, the Tigers, if you look at some of the past draft classes, it's it's rough. If it's rough sledding.
Yeah, I mean, you can find the skills, in rounds. It's easier there to see. It's usually more developed guys, either whether compared to the rest of the prep class or whether compared to the rest of the college class. But up there, it's kind of easier. Everywhere else, you're doing a lot of forecasting. I think Wenzel is an interesting example, just because I think you guys were on this too. Like, it was like 2 or 3 years ago where it was just like, dude, he just cannot throw in the infield. He's got plus speed. Why don't they try him in the outfield? And we've all kind of slowly picked up the pace there and kind of expecting like, hey, maybe you should try this because the infield's not working out. So that was a point where just by his foot speed alone, you could still find another role for him. But at the same time, it was hard to know where to put him on the prospect list last year, because I was like, okay, light hitting infielder, I think he'll hit. He has the bat to ball skills, but I have no idea where they're going to play him. There isn't a position for him. And, until you kind of know that, it's pretty hard to forecast. Like, the Tigers could have just decided to like bring him up here as a right fielder and a second baseman and been scared to play him in the infield. If they hadn't finally decided like, okay, this just hasn't worked. His only path is to move to the outfield and try something different. But, you could kind of see that coming. It's just that, again, it's real life and you kind of want to play it out. You want Wenzel Perez to get as much time as possible in the infield to see if it'll work out. But yeah, once he's ready to hit in the major leagues and he's 24 and it's like, well, we don't have forever, figure something out. Where can he play?
Yeah. Where could be the most effective? And a couple guys that come in mind are top from 20 to 10 here that come in that situation. Guys like Eddie Leonard, who could play in the outfield. Max Anderson still, to me, doesn't have a defined position. I could see him. There's definitely some signs where he could play first. He could play anywhere. Second, maybe second base is not his permanent position. Maybe he goes in the right field. Who knows? And Leonard has, again, people have said that he has a decent glove at short, but his speed out there could put him in the outfield. And Lee can hold his own at second base, but again, he's also a guy that you could see definitely at some point perhaps going out the outfield. That's another one too that Lee's, by the way, he didn't change our list, Chris, did he? It was 12th last time, 12th this time too, right?
I didn't even look to see if guys moved, but I think that's about right. Yeah.
Yeah. So, by the way, thank you for the $5, Sean. Appreciate that. That's the I almost had played the wrong drop there. Oh, that's not the one.
How much more we got to lose?
Yeah, how much you want us?
See, not that one.
That's
Exquisite.
how much will we got to lose?
Off the Frickers building.
Brandon, have you heard her new drop yet?
No, I don't think I have.
No. Oh yeah, this is Anthony Townsend or Anthony Towns from
Carl Anthony Towns, yeah.
Carl Anthony Towns.
How much more we got to lose?
Yeah, how much you want us to
We're
lose?
losing for 20 years.
That's over the Timberwolves. By the way, Timberwolves came back from 20 points down to beat the defending NBA champion Denver Nuggets last night. And I was watching the NBA playoffs. I've been watching it. It's actually been some good, wild, crazy stuff. Jaden Ham comes in at number 10, and is he he wants to know specifically, I asked you, Chris, is he a long-term reliever? I think if he's going to be a starter, he has to get some more miles per hour, and we talked about that a little bit too. But he has to. That curveball, that breaking ball has to be a little sharper at Double-A in order not to get destroyed in Erie.
Yeah, he's. I look at him as a starter right now. That there's we talked about there's 4 distinct pitches there. They all need to get a little bit better, right? He needs to throw the changeup a little bit more to get lefties, and the needs to avoid leaving the curve over the heart of the plate, and you get a little bit more horizontal break if you can on the slider, but. The fastball, I'm not as concerned about the velocity. It would be nice if he threw harder, but it's just such a good shape, especially when he throws it up, that that I think he can get by with that. I don't know if Double-A hitters are going to chase it as much or swing and miss as much, but right now I think the strikes are there. It's an unusual delivery, I guess, but it's not. He repeats it pretty well, and he's. Yeah, I don't see any reason to project him into the bullpen yet, Other than people might say, oh, that's kind of a relievery delivery, but it doesn't seem to have like a lot of effort. It's just a long arm action.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I don't know. I'm not throwing him into the bullpen mix yet. I mean, you can consider everybody. I mean, Jackson Jobe could make a great reliever if you need to, right? Like,
Yeah.
But there are other guys in the system who I think who are masquerading as starting pitchers when they're probably bullpen guys, and I wouldn't say that about Ham yet.
No,
Yeah.
and they're also kind of it just happens that the Tigers, as the rotation gets better, this is just going to happen more and more. Like the bar just starts to get a little bit higher. Matt Manning can't really crack this rotation now. And yeah, we can have the Maeda Manning argument, but you start to pile up where it's like, okay, is Herter ever going to really like crack that rotation full time? No. But is it possible that for another team, he might be their fifth starter? Yeah, maybe. So yeah, again, it's team. There's some elements of like the role. I kind of thought, I thought they kind of would shorten Ham's arm action the way that Melton's has kind of developed a little bit. But yeah, I mean, other than that, I mean, I basically agree with your Ham assessment. I think he's a starter, and I actually think he's going to get a lot better, but you kind of have to see it. They'll be working on his extension. They're going to try to get him, stronger in the lower half and a little more flexible. He's already like decent in that regard, but I'm sure they'd like a little bit more. But I don't know if he necessarily needs more velocity. I just think that the Tigers have shown that they can develop a guy's velocity now pretty consistently. Just about everybody has gained, a tick to 3 ticks to 4 ticks over the past couple of years. So I don't think that's a wild expectation. And Joe Ryan has a great shape on his fastball and throws 91, 92. So, if you have the shapes and can command it and keep it out of the middle of the plate and still throw strikes, you can get a long way. His secondary pitches all need work for sure. It kind of seems like he'd be better off with a hard slider to me. And maybe they'll start working on that. But that's another thing about development is like, how much do you expect to put on a dude's plate? Like right off the bat, like, okay, we're going to fix this curveball. We're going to tune up your slider and we're going to teach you a split change grip. And we also want to alter your delivery. And we're going to do that this spring,
Yeah. Well,
you have to kind of stagger it out. Yeah.
Well, and in his case, they may have talked about it or discussed it, but said, hey, go out and pitch the way you pitch and we'll see how long it works. And so far, so good. But like,
it's like with your kids, sometimes you have to let them prove it, you have to let them make the mistakes or something.
Yeah. And
speak of,
may have to
go ahead, Chris. Sorry.
I was just saying, yeah, he may have to get to AA and then hit a speed bump, and then we might see some adjustments. But that's basically what we're saying.
Yeah. By the way, talk about Cole Keefe getting extra bases. He's got a double to score the Tigers' second run. They're now down 8-2 in the top of the 7th inning. So it was just talking about. Go ahead.
Yeah, the first 2 balls he hit a billion miles an hour, and this one was a 78 mile an hour with 1 degree launch angle for a double. Baseball,
classic.
Yeah, that's baseball for you. No, and see there it is. Oh, that's a good pitch right there. That when he get that curve down like that, that's a damn good pitch. And that in terms of his mechanics, Brandon, I completely agree. If you could put a slider to that delivery, that'd be awesome. Somebody commented on Montero being too high on our list. I guess apparently they've only watched the last 4 of his starts, and Montero struggled a little bit. But if you're going to look at his whole body of work before you, the guy led the minor leagues in strikeouts last year, or led the Tigers minor league system in strikeouts last year, and moved up 3 levels. So I don't know what people want, because he's struggling right now. Right, just looking at his last couple starts. But either way, Madden at number 7. That was, I don't know, like there's like, what was it over the weekend? He started, and for whatever reason, Toledo decided on Saturday to put in a positional player down 2 in the 5th inning. Not sure what the hell happened. Even the Indian go ahead, Chris.
Yeah, I think because Madden only gave him 1 2/3 innings, right? It was like 4 hits, 4 earned runs, and then they had a doubleheader the next day. And I think Maeda was scheduled to pitch 3 innings, so they knew they had a ton of innings to cover.
Yeah,
and so they sent Ronnie Unroe out there to really take one for the team, and boy did he! It was 10 hits, 10 earned runs, 3 home runs, 2 walks, and then Bly Madris, I think, came in to get the final out. So yeah, I don't know.
Yeah, that was one of those ones where you looked at the score and then you kind of had to piece back, because I didn't watch that game. I was just like, what the heck happened there? But yeah, they just ran out of pitching. That's pretty much all it comes down to. Montero's an interesting case because like nobody nationally still, is really paying attention. But, you know, I mean, the dude's racking up 30% plus strikeout rates for years now. You know, AAA is harder to throw strikes in because of the ABS system. And, you know, we've seen plenty of pitchers kind of have this weird adjustment where they suddenly have to like just start throwing it down the middle just to compete there, and then sort of expand back out and sort of figure out how to handle that. And then you go to the major leagues and the rules are different. Can we get the same rules all across the major leagues again? At some point, we're going to get there. I believe it. But I love that you have Montero that high. I think I've still got Madden ahead of him just because I think Madden's a little more consistent. And now that I can see the split change, I'm a little bit more willing to believe that he can handle the lefties and kind of solve some of these problems. But he got up to AAA, and after kind of solving the lefty problem, he has to solve the problem, you know, again at the AAA level with lefties. So, you know, Mr. Bay hit him up pretty good the other day, and, you know, a couple other lefties. So, you know, it's the next step there. I think Madden is a little bit more proven strike thrower, but Montero's been durable. Montero has the higher ceiling because he's got 2 potentially 70 breaking balls if he ever could sort of tune the whole thing together and be really consistent with them. And, you know, their fastballs are pretty equivalent. Montero has a little better shape. Maybe Madden has a bit more velocity. You know, you can kind of pick your poison there, but I really like both of them. I think we're in pretty good shape with the 2 of those guys, and then Melton and Ham coming after them. Job will be in the rotation as soon as they decide to put Job in the rotation, but the future beyond him looks pretty good too.
Yeah, I know. And that's where, I mean, I look at somebody like Gibson Long, who's, you know, he's on the IL, obviously. I still think that he could be somewhat of a serviceable reliever or a back end starter. I wanted to also, Campos was like 2021, and this year Campos has been hitting the ball better. There is some data that indicates too he's cut back on the ground balls, so there's something to be said about that. Defensively, they've been playing him. He's been playing better defensively. He's not. I know his knock on him is his defense. I mean, I plan on going to West Michigan when they come back. They're away again. They're not coming back till after Memorial Day weekend. I think they come back for the first week of June for their first home series. And you look at his numbers right now, the ISO numbers are about identical to what they were towards the tail end of last year. But it's, as far as like slugging goes, yeah, okay, same thing. The numbers are kind of similar. But what's encouraging to me, at least, is along the line, the ground balls are at 38%, comparatively speaking to 47% last year. And his line drive numbers are at 30%. So he's getting in the fly balls are about 30. It's like 30%. So he's figuring things out. And that's something that people are talking about. Oh, he's been there for a couple of years. God, folks, he's only what, 22? I mean, I don't understand.
Yeah, I don't even think he's that old. Yeah.
Yeah. So yeah, I don't get the. Well, he's been there for a while.
I mean, he's another one. You know, I mentioned him earlier. Is part of that group where like, the tools are there. It's just the performance, and then, you know, I thought he turned the corner, and then this week it was like 2 for 20 something with 14 strikeouts and 1 walk. And it was like, maybe he doesn't see the ball well in Peoria. I don't know. But it's again, like, we've seen flashes from these guys. You know, my initial list, I don't think I had Isaac Pacheco in my top 30 when I just initially put the list together, and then I was like, all right, well, I probably have to keep him in there because there's still some hope there. It's just, you know, it's easy to get down on these guys when they're struggling early on or when they haven't shown a ton of you know, progress, but sometimes it clicks for guys later in the season. So you just kind of, like we said earlier, it's that balancing act of holding on to the tools a little bit and hoping that they eventually catch up.
Yeah, and a little bit of, like, you know, process starting to work, but the results aren't there yet.
Yeah.
You know what he has to do, which is hit more fly balls and get the ball off the ground. And he's starting to show some signs of doing that. But if he actually really gets it locked in, because of his raw ability, you're just going to start seeing home runs and doubles, you know, flying off the wall and over the wall. And it'll be obvious, you know, if Roberto Campos figures it out, and he is just shy of his 21st birthday still, and was up there, you know, when he was 19. I mean, he was just kind of advanced for that age, but, you know, clearly wasn't ready to just torch the league and move through. So, but yeah, I mean, the raw power there is plentiful. And if he ever taps into it, there won't be a whole lot of question. But for the time being, it's like looking at that little step in terms of process, hitting less ground balls, and hoping that you start to see that breakout. So, but there's still a question of how much you want to believe in it, and I can totally understand. Like after seeing it, for a couple of years, you start to wear out and you start to get down on the guy. But Wenzel Perez had that time period too, where everybody was pretty much done with him. Parker Meadows got to the brink where everybody was like, nope, this is never going to happen. We've been telling him to shorten his swing and clean up his hand path and all this stuff for a couple of years. He hasn't been able to do it. Well, then he did it. Some of those stories I think we've seen from Ryan Garco interviews with you guys and elsewhere that they knew what he needed to do, and they emphasized it in a way that was not being done beforehand. And so I'm not sure you're going to see like that delineation that you saw in 2022 where, Ryan Garco shows up and all of a sudden all these guys get better. They should theoretically be in a better process and a better plan from the get-go here. And so maybe we won't see as many late breakouts, 2 or 3 years from now. They'll either break out when they're younger or not at all. But we'll just kind of have to see how that plays out. But yeah, for now, you just keep playing Campos and hope we start seeing the dingers. And until that really happens, you can move them up. And I guess eventually they'll send them to Erie sometime this summer because it's either going to be working or it isn't. But until you start to see the dingers, there's not a whole lot else to worry about. You don't have to watch them a whole ton. It's going to be kind of an all or nothing type show when it happens, if it does.
I mean, I look at somebody too, like another guy on the list too, in terms of like just making an adjustment on another level in Troy Melton, and that's the final pitcher before. I mean, obviously, he's one of the. I mean, we have Bersenio too. We're definitely gonna talk about Bersenio and McGonigal here because we do have some Flying Tiger representation for the first time, like in the top 10, which has not been the case in quite some time on our list. Usually, it's been AA, high A dominated. I mean, I know levels don't really play a thing, but it's just interesting to see some, for the first time, some Lakeland, some guys from the Flying Tigers. But Melton has adjusted pretty well in AA so far. He's got a K per 9 of 9.1. And what I liked about him so far, gentlemen, is that it's the same thing we saw last year at West Michigan. He's kind of learning a little bit how to pitch on a higher level, and he's making those adjustments in game, and you can see that like it going on as the game progresses.
Yeah, he had a rough outing in his last outing. He gave up 3 home runs. It was just one of those things that happens. But he still managed to get some strikeouts. And yeah, I don't know. I mean, he's one of the other guys that I don't have a ton of relief concern about Melton, although I still don't really know, with his pitches. I'm not sure which one's going to be the major league out pitch, but I think he'll figure it out eventually.
Yeah, I mean, he's got a good enough changeup and a good enough breaking ball that I can picture them developing without too much trouble. Like it doesn't, to a degree, it just needs to be a little sharper and a little more consistent. I think the fastball shape varies a little bit. Sometimes that gets him trouble. He'll flatten a couple out, and occasionally someone will run into one. But yeah, I mean, he'd barely given up any home runs, going back pretty much all last year. He just was not giving up home runs, not getting hit hard in the air. So that was kind of a rare outing for him. And, you can look at that and be down on it, or you can be like, okay, well, this is why he's there, is to occasionally find some people who can hit him up and learn to start adjusting to move up. We worry about, or at least I worry about Job, because I just don't see that much challenge for him. I don't see much challenge for Ham at West Michigan. As soon as I start to feel that way, I'm like, yeah, move him up. let's go. But, Melton just has a lot to like there. The athleticism, how fast he's developed, how little pitching experience he really has. He's really only kind of been a dedicated pitcher for a couple seasons now. So you've got, a fresh arm there that was hitting 102. Last spring camp a year ago, we didn't see too much triple digits in the regular season last year, but it's in there. And again, we see, what the Tigers have been able to do in terms of biomechanics, in terms of, developing their pitchers in the gym, in the weight room, as well as on the mound. And, I don't think there's a huge leap that needs to go on there for Troy Melton to be a top 100 pitcher. I just think the breaking ball needs to get a little bit sharper. I think the changeup needs to be a little more consistent. These are all, not ridiculous asks. He has to do it, and we'll have to see if he can do it over the course of the season. But, he got there pretty quick. So, he's going to need time to work.
Yeah. Yeah, no, it's just wanted to put I found the other video profile that I was doing here earlier. Lynn Henning today brought up something about Dingler seeing possibly time at the major league level, and I kind of scoffed at that a little bit because I know Dingler has been hitting better as of late, and I think he's getting better. I mean, there's been signs of it all year round. His ground, like one stat that stood out to me about him is that in terms of hitting more, like his ground ball rate has decreased from like 46% to 29% in Toledo.
Yeah.
And so he has been hitting the ball pretty hard as of late. The defense has been there. So I don't know. Like it's there's a lot of positive signs to see Dingler, but I honestly know it sounds like maybe perhaps sacrilegious, but I like Carson Kelly at Jake Rogers right now. I would like to see Dingler get a chance in September, maybe if those two, if one of the Kelly struggles or what have you. But the catching depth in the organization, as Henning was mentioning, is not very deep. But I don't know. There's De La Cruz. I don't know. I think it's kind of weird to write that off as they don't have a lot of depth. I think they have some depth, but it's.
Yeah, I mean, there's those questions about Bracino, and you don't know. There's still a lot of question as to whether he's a catcher. But I think you kind of have to play Dingler this year if you get the chance. He needs to see the major leagues and start getting his process together there. And I think the reason you could be comfortable calling him up is because the problem isn't his defensive game. I think AJ Hinch has said as much. And AJ Hinch isn't real complimentary of his catchers in the minor leagues. Are real anxious to be like, oh yeah, he'll be fine. AJ Hinch is not that way with his catchers, nor is Chris Fetter. I think Dylan Dingler would come up and do just fine behind the plate. Do I expect he'd get torched by major league pitching? Yeah, probably. But so does Jake Rogers and Carson Kelly to some extent. Catcher is the position where you're okay with that. And yeah, Carson Kelly and Jake Rogers are both grading out well defensively. We know they're both good behind the plate, and the Tigers seem pretty comfortable with them. And when you look at how good the Tigers pitching staff is, don't write off that part of it, because having two good catchers that everyone is really comfortable working with and having called the game is a big part of that. And some teams still ignore that a little bit. The Astros never did. They just run Martin Maldonado out there forever, even though he didn't even necessarily grade out that well defensively, because having the guy that their pitchers were comfortable with and that they were comfortable with, running the game was more important to them than that one spot in the lineup. And, I would assume the Tigers are going to continue to feel the same way.
Yeah. I look at Dingler's impact on the rotation last year in Erie after he came back from injury.
Yep.
Yeah, I mean, to the question if he can be worse than the guys that are up there now, the answer is yes. We talked before about how the jump from AAA to the majors is huge, and all along the way, Dingler's numbers have been worse than Jake Rogers were when he was in the minors. Now, something strange is going on with Dingler this year, and it's early enough that it might not mean anything, but both his strikeout rate and his walk rate are way down. He's putting a lot more balls in play now, and he's actually, he's hitting better, as it were. He's not hitting for a ton of power, and he's not, without the walks, the kind of overall offensive value has gone down, but he's not striking out at an exorbitant rate anymore, which is progress there. So, yeah, it would shock me if we don't see him at some point this year.
Yeah, I mean, his ground ball rate, last year was 46.9% at AAA. It was 32.8 at AA, but yeah, it's 29.3 right now. He's got a 32% line drive rate going, and he's not popping that many up. So there's some things there, where you see the results haven't been great, but you see some process work there starting to come to fruition. And I think, for most of us, the Tigers don't seem to emphasize, they're emphasizing defense with their catchers.
Yeah.
And they'll assume you'll figure it out as well as you can. Like Jake Rogers could not hit a lick when they called him up in 2019. It was, he hit 2 home runs, and then it was a debacle that made Ron Gardenhire cry. And, had to send him down. And, then he went to, who was it? Oh, the guy on the West Coast, I can't remember his name at the moment, but got a private hitting coach, made some changes to his swing, and, started to figure it out at least enough to hang. And that's probably all you're going to get out of Dingler, at best, is a guy who hits enough to play catcher for you and, cashes in some power. But catchers are often late developing as hitters because that's not what they're focused on. So there's still some hope for Dingler, I would say.
speaking of late development, Justice Bigby has been hitting the ball pretty well as of late, and it's because Sam brings him up in YouTube on our YouTube chat, and he's done really well. And that's something worth noticing that, again, came on late last year or beginning last year, and I don't think he wasn't on our top 30. You mentioned it earlier, right, Chris? He wasn't on our May update.
Not in May, no. And then it was like, we just fall in the games in West Michigan, and it's like, hey, Justice Bigby with another home run, Justice Bigby with another double, and like he came up to Erie and it was like Justice Bigby with another 3-hit game. It just kept going and going and going, and he hasn't cracked, he hasn't figured out AAA quite yet, but he's improving right now. So it's always been a tough profile with Bigby because he's an outfield only, corner outfield only, hits the ball super hard, but he doesn't pull it a ton, so there's not a ton of over the fence power, and it's just a tough profile to see that playing in the big leagues, but there's enough there that it's still really interesting, if that makes any sense.
He feels like a guy that if you gave him to the Dodgers, they'd figure this out, and all of a sudden he'd just be hitting nukes. Because there's so much hard contact, but it's just not pulled in the air enough to count, and that's
Tampa
process and results. Yeah, maybe Tampa. I mean the Eat Sock Paredes protocol. I wrote that article about Perez last night, and one thing I did notice is that even though his max exit velocity is only like 105.6, Isak's is only like 106 something. Yep. If you pull the damn ball in the air and hit it as hard as you can, you don't have to have plus raw power. Kerry Carpenter doesn't have the raw power that Torkelson or Baez or Green have, but he crushes the ball in the air. That's what you got to do.
I went back and I was going through a bunch of my old articles that I'd written for Motor City Bengals a few years back, and I had one about Isaac Paredes' fatal flaw was that he didn't hit the ball hard enough. And back then I don't remember, it was a point of discussion that he didn't have like a single barrel that year with the Tigers. And the problem wasn't that he hasn't hit the ball any harder in Tampa. He just has learned how to pull it exclusively in the air. And like back then he was not hitting as many fly balls. He was like using the whole field. It just wasn't doing any good for him. Yeah. So, I mean, sometimes guys just figure it out in the big leagues once they get to a different situation.
And in 2021, the Tigers were telling him to do exactly that and working with him to do it. And we saw him start to hook all these balls foul. And, it just hadn't come to fruition yet. And they unfortunately traded him before it did. Maybe it wouldn't have got there, but I kind of don't think Tampa did any major swing changes with him or anything. No. They just changed the setup a little bit, pulled the ball in the air, just kept yelling that at him, and eventually it worked out. And a little bit, with Wenzel, it's he just stopped hitting the ball on the ground. And even though he doesn't have, even though you'd put him at below average raw power, there's nothing on the ground. There's nothing. Go look up, major league batting average on ground balls versus line drives or even fly balls, and then go look at slug. You can't hit the ball on the ground in the major leagues. The infielders are too good. The defensive positioning is too good. Can't do it. So even if you're, a slappy little light hitting dude and you're like, oh, this launch angle stuff is bullshit. No, you got to hit the ball in the air. You don't have to lift them. You don't have to drop your rear shoulder. No one's telling you to do anything crazy. You got to catch the ball out front and, hit the ball hard in the air.
No, there's a science to it that is still impressive how much goes into that. Just where, like, I remember that in Chicago where Paredes hit, like, I think it was like one of his first home runs was like just a massive, like, whoa, like just innate. And then you thought, okay, well, maybe it was like the turn the corner thing, and it didn't happen that way. And it was just line drive after line drive. But as far as Jay Hen go, like Justin Henry Malloy is brought up in the chat, and he's also up next on our as we're going to quickly go through these. He's hitting the ball not as hard as the other guys are. So that's where you kind of have to look at that and go, okay, well, what does that mean? He's getting doubles at 86 miles an hour, but he's still good plate recognition. He's still hitting the ball. But Chris, I like the way you said this here. Sutton contacted her, Dingler.
Yeah. A whole week with 0 walks and 1 strikeout.
Yeah.
Like I said, it's I don't know what's going on there, but I would consider it a positive development. Would like to see those walks stick around, but I think we've talked about it before with Dingler. Sometimes he would just wait too long to swing at the ball. He'd be down 0-2 immediately or whatever, and so maybe now he's just being more aggressive.
Parker Meadows kind of had
Yeah.
that same problem where he'd just be really passive, and you can go wrong trying to control the strike zone too much. Like you are still trying to hit the goddamn ball, and not just take a bunch of strikes. But there's kind of a balance there. You want to see pitches, but if the first pitch you see is the one you're looking for, well, you damn well better hit it. Dingo's kind of looking like Dane Myers or something this week.
Yeah, there you go.
kind of what he's reminding me of.
Dane Myers with the home run yesterday.
Yeah, which is awesome. It's so cool to see that work out for him. There's an interesting story to talk about his development path.
2020 guy, and the Tiger
had him pitching, and he was throwing 92, 91. Big B is another one where it's like there's enough there where you could see it coming. Malloy, same deal. And I loved last week that whole conversation about in zone whiff rate. Yeah. I just think that keeps coming back to Malloy. If you probably watch that one statistics, and if you start to see it go the right way, he's probably going to get called up. Because if he starts driving the ball, in the zone, we know he's not going to chase that much. But he just swings and misses too much in the zone and doesn't do as much damage as you'd think for a guy with his power. So, maybe he'll solve that. I'm sure they're working on it. But it's year 2 at Toledo, and that's the goal. When you start to see that happen, they'll figure it out for him. And the Tigers could use a right-handed bat, pretty badly actually right now.
Yeah. I like what old BK said here. I like it. Let's change the control strike zone to hit the goddamn ball. And
however you got to do it. Yeah. I don't care if it's in the strike zone or not. If you hit it hard,
no, please do, because it just it's like, what is it? They say in hockey, just you throw it on the net and see what happens.
Yeah. It's just and it's like anything when you're teaching someone something like that, you tend to like exaggerate, to the other side to get them to work toward it. Like for some guys, they're free swingers. You need them to really have it in mind, like. Do not chase anything early in the count. Wait for that one pitch that you're looking for and get your best swing off. Whereas other guys are naturally like oriented that way. And if you keep telling them, you've got to control the strike zone, we want to see you just swinging at good pitches. Yeah, you might breed a little bit too much passivity into their whole approach. And then all of a sudden that AAA, like, some crusty old coach comes up to him and is like, listen, son, forget all that bullshit. Just take your rips, you'll be fine. Finally snapped them out of it,
What are you talking about, Doug Minkevich there?
Yeah, maybe.
I remember
was that what Mankowitz's job was, to just go up to dudes and just be like, "Hey, just hit the damn ball."
Doug Minkevich, I guess, complained about Jake Rogers and Daz Cameron and their approaches at the plate, and complained about everybody, just the way they were swinging at the plate. But no, Flores to the DIL. I mean, Flores has been struggling as of late. Just kind of, what was the injury, Chris? That part I missed.
I don't know. Yeah, I didn't see that either.
The Tigers are doing the Red Wings. Mysterious,
it's they don't usually tell you when it's in the minors. So it could have been something that's been lingering the whole time. I think we need to consider that perhaps cutting his hair messed up his equilibrium. Maybe there's an inner ear issue. Because he wasn't a guy who struggled throwing a ton of strikes. 2 years ago he threw a lot of strikes, and last year it was a little bit iffy, and this year he's having all sorts of trouble. So I don't know what's going on, but. It's been rough for him so far. You see him, I think he slid down our list a decent ways.
Yeah.
Because part of that is just natural when you get moved from starting to the bullpen. There's just not as much value there.
Yeah, there's a thing about him too that I think that is still the Tigers trying to do the 3-inning thing where they're trying to figure out exactly what a role would be. It sounds like more of a bullpen role versus a starter role. But what has been the case here with like Brent Herter, for example, he's still a starter. You could see him at that, like with that slider whiff right there, Chris. He could be a lefty out of the bullpen, like just based off that kind of swingman role. You could see that with.
It's that slider is a knockout pitch for him. His changeup has a pretty good whiff rate too. It's his sinker and his fastball just get hammered. Yeah. Now the results are still okay, but it's going to be a balancing act for him.
And Parker Meadows having no problem with Toledo whatsoever. It looks like his swing is a little back in alignment, but again, go ahead.
I mentioned on the show yesterday with Yoop and Mike that's what you want to see when a guy go back to Toledo. You want to see him go down there and just absolutely dominate. Like I said, that's what big leaguers go down and hit like 350 in AAA. because they're good. And so Meadows, it was rough for the first couple games, first 4 or 5 games, and then he's been on a tear the last 3 or 4, which is good to see. I don't know if he's going to keep doing that, but it's nice to see him bounce back for sure.
And moving on to Erie, where Erie had in terms of like we're talking about Workman's week, 3 for 27, just yikes. But the stat that stood out to me was the Garrett Burhan start, his first AA start, 5 innings, 4 hits, no run, just 1 earned run, which was a home run and 4 strikeouts. The bullpen work from the Seawolves, which has been their source of strength, obviously. The bats, and this is a Harrisburg team that's got Dylan Cruz. They got some really good prospects on this team, and they were able to scrap out a 3 or 4 week because they also had to play a double header for a makeup game, I believe it was. And now they come home and play the worst team in the Eastern League, which I think had at one point Altoona had like a 12-game losing streak or something ridiculous like that.
That's toughy.
Yeah.
So no, that's there's not much to write home about with Erie, so we can kind of Melton's start was good. I mean, the strikeout, the 3 home runs you mentioned, Chris, but we saw this before at West Michigan, where sometimes he just puts one over and just gets hammered, and he comes back down. He's fine.
I did want to, if you can go back just for a second. Sorry, two things I want to point out. That the Hao Lee one, he's got a 120 WRC plus. I was looking. He's one of 4 age 21 or younger players in the Eastern League who can say that. The other 2 are Marcelo Meyer or Brady House, and then there's Edison Polino. So
nice.
He's right up there with some of the highly drafted players. And then the last thing I did want to mention, Garrett Burhan. I think you and I, Raj, both had him in our top 30s, but I don't think any of the other guys did. And I do think he's a top 30 prospect in the system right now. He came up and pitched well, and it does. I think it's the development of that kind of cutter slider that has really changed his future. I still think it's probably a bullpen. But he's a 4-pitch guy now, and that I don't know, 3.5. His curve is not really a good pitch. It's just kind of a first pitch, like drop it in there. But he's throwing strikes, and I've never been crazy about his delivery, but he's doing it in AA now, and so I do think he's deserving to be in that 25-30 range in the system. I just wanted to mention him for a second.
And give due to Dan Hasty, who said that one of the one guy he would call up instantly. One of the first names he mentioned was Garrett Burhan, because based off some of the improvements he was making, and it was pretty, he's been pretty much on the money with that. So that was something that when that happened, it was really no surprise to him at all. So
yeah, you'd love to see the stuff come along, just a little bit more, but he's a good enough strike thrower and has good enough command of a couple pitches where it's looking much more workable. It still feels like there's like a physical level, like one of these pitches has got to pop to really get him to the show in any capacity, but it's starting to come together. You can see him doing better, and when a guy is improving, you kind of want to let that go as far as it goes before you like start recategorize him, like, okay, now he's here, now he's at this level. He's sort of in situ at the moment, but he's definitely been good for them, that's for sure.
No, as far as, like, by the way, somebody was mentioning there's nothing right home about Erie, well, Erie's a great place and all that, but I mean, it's just, you look at the offensive numbers, we see Workman go 3 for 27. It's just pitching and all that. So I apologize to our listener in Erie for offending their good sensibilities about the Seawolves, but the bullpen work continues to do well. As West Michigan, the theme, okay, you could put across the board, the theme between the highest levels is good pitching, across the board. No doubt about it. But then you see Campos. We're just talking about Campos, 2 for 23. Pacheco, 3 for 20. You're not, but you went 5-1. You went 5-1 though. Yeah. Because you had Max Anderson, who continues to be a pretty consistent presence. Even with Luke Gold having a bad week, he went 5-1 because of good pitching, and that's what good pitching can do on the road. And Colin Fields, Chris, I've only watched one of his starts, but went out there 2 innings. He was a 2-game starter this week and had a pretty good week. But the debut of Joe Miller, he's the first Lakeland arm to be called up to start, correct?
I believe so. For so far this year, yeah. First one to, he's. I I think Brandon has talked about him a couple times before, whereas it's not like the velocity is only like low 90s. It doesn't jump off the page, but he's got a honey of a curveball that just seems to give low A or A ball hitters fits, and he throws strikes. So it's been fun so far with him.
And he's got kind of a cutting fastball too, which they don't see hardly at all. So it's like a lefty, with a good changeup or something at that level where it's just, it's just a completely different look, I think, for them right now. So we'll have to see if they can develop him a lot further than that, because he's got a long way to go. But I do kind of pay attention to him. He's interesting.
And I think that West Michigan's only loss this week was a 1-0 game, I think, on Tuesday. And it had and they were like inches away from tying it in the ninth. The Peoria right fielder made a diving grab to rob Dom Johnson of a game-tying hit. So, yeah, they played really well this week. And honestly, I think 3-4 weeks ago, we were like, well, they're not going to be competing. They're only 2 games back out of first place now, which is kind of wild. So,
that pitching is so good up and down the system now that, it's almost all of them are competing, even if they don't really have a whole lot going on. And even in kind of a poor week, Luke Gold still hit 2 home runs and 2 doubles. He's doing damage, doing lots of damage anyway.
Honestly, yeah. I mean, the offense in West Michigan has been better than I would have expected this year. I mean, Luke Gold has just continued to break out a little bit, but then even the guys, like, they're missing Andrew Jenkins right now, but he was performing, and Turney, when he's not injured, has been hitting really well too. So they've got more bats than I expected, even while guys like Campos and Pacheco and Graham are kind of up and down. So it's been a more enjoyable team this year to watch than I expected.
They've got a bona fide leadoff hitter too, which not everybody has. I mean, at that level, Seth Stevenson is an absolute nightmare. Like nobody wants to let him on base, and once he does, there isn't a whole lot you're going to do to stop him.
And
he made a good diving play the other day. I think it was Tuesday or Wednesday. I was watching, and he made a really good sliding catch in center field, and it's been a menace out there.
He's a grinder, man. He also gets hit by the ball all the time. He's got 7 hit by pitches so far this year.
Speaking of the bullpen, though, is the opposite effect here with Lakeland, as Lakeland does have, by the way, the second best offense next to Clearwater in the Florida State League, and the bats were sizzling. Brent Callahan, number 30 on our list, was an extra baseman powerhouse. Samuel Gill, good to see him come a bit alive here, guys, because there was a guy who was struggling a little bit, and he's been, as of the last couple of weeks, notice his production's picked up quite a bit. Max Clark showing off his defensive range. He had a really good outfield assist the other day. Jose Briseño to the IL, which is kind of worrisome, but then you realize the rest of the offense just is so good, it doesn't really, it just kind of blends in there a little bit. And Andrew Sears, who won the Florida State League Pitcher of the Week last week, I believe it was, another strong starting for him. The starting pitching hasn't been the problem, guys. It's the bullpen has just been awful.
To stand up, we don't know. Again, we don't know why Briseño went to the injured list. We don't know that yet. And I don't know if
super serious, but hard to say.
I don't know if Clay is still hanging out, but he asked us about Sears, way back at the beginning of the show, what we thought of him. I actually had him. I think I ranked him 40th. And we talked about him a couple weeks ago because it's a really interesting arm. Just he's kind of a tall, lanky guy with a low 3/4 arm slot from the left side, and it's a sinker that's like 93, 95.
Yeah.
And he's got a pretty solid slider, and he's starting to throw his changeup more, which is intriguing to me. For him, it's just a matter of throwing more strikes. As you see there, I put it's 15% walk rate so far this year. It has been better lately, although he did walk 3 in this start. But I mean, he has the look of a future like lefty bullpen arm to me. Like, and possibly if he's throwing in short stints, he could be up living in the mid 90s and touching higher, which would be really interesting. So, he's a name to keep an eye on. I just, I haven't made a huge determination on him yet because he is a college guy pitching in low A.
Yeah. Yep. And another one, Zach Lee, who they picked up last July or something like that. The development there is going pretty well, but he's also a little bit older. They lost Briseño, but they did get Luis Santana down there on a rehab, who's going to be pretty good down there for him. So that kind of balances the forces a little bit offensively. But Sears is interesting looking. I haven't really dove into his spin rates and all the pitch shapes and everything like that. Just watched him one time. Looked interesting to me. Anybody who can, and lefty throwing that hard is going to be interesting in the first place. And then, yeah, it's kind of a funky arm slot, kind of well, I don't know. An inverted Tanner Cole-Hep is kind of a vague comparison, but there's something similar there to me.
Inverted Cole-Hep sounds like it sounds like something, a medical issue, doesn't it?
Yep. Your Cole-Hep has been inverted, man. We're gonna have to keep you overnight. Sorry.
I do want to, you touched on Samuel Hill, Raj. One thing, this is both good and bad, I think, and people can listen to determine how they want it. But his numbers are almost are awfully close to Max Clark's overall in terms of hitting, power. Clark is walking more and striking out less than Hill, but they're both 19. They're both putting up pretty similar offensive numbers, and we don't talk about Samuel Hill that much.
Yeah.
And I'll be honest, like with the Max Clark stuff, like I wanted to have him fourth on my top 30. I wanted to swap him and McGonigal. I wanted McGonigal second.
Ooh, juicy. Yes.
But I told myself, and this is probably how I shouldn't do this, because we've seen all the other secondary skills from Max Clark. You talking about it, we've seen him make some great diving catches. He had a nice outfield assist the other day. He's very fast, all that. But the power has basically been non-existent, and in his swing, just it doesn't work for me. There's a lot to like about, like, he has a good idea of the strike zone. He's got a good plate discipline, and he can get the bat on the ball very well. It's just the swing itself. It's like it's built to hit bouncers between third base and shortstop, and I don't really understand how they came to that to being his swing. It's just like a throwback swing. Like it reminds me of like Brett Butler or something. Like you just don't see anybody swing like this anymore. It's not even like a Juan Pierre. Like it's a leadoff man skill set, but I don't know. I just don't want to. I didn't want to put him down too much for it being so early in his career. That's basically the only reason I didn't move him down. But you compare his swing to Kevin McGonigal's, and McGonigal's just looks much better.
Yeah.
But then Clark has those excellent secondary tools, and you hope that with those basic plate discipline and bat to ball skills that he can eventually find a swing that does look more like McGonigal's. But that was a tough one for me, and I ended up kind of wussing out and keeping him number 2 in the system, even though I don't think it's fair to him to have him as like a top 20 prospect in baseball right now, because he doesn't. That's not what he looks like to me. He looks like a top. Like there's like 80 to 100, if I'm being honest. So,
I tend to agree with that. Yeah,
but the Brett Butler reference, it depends on with the Dodgers or the Indians. I remember Brett Butler had that weird turtleneck thing going too. That was his big thing. He always had a turtleneck on, no matter what time of year it was. It's really strange.
He was an awesome leadoff man. Like if that's what Max Clark ends up being, that'd be just fine. Honestly, I was trying to think of somebody with that kind of weird, just slap and run approach. It's like not even like Ichiro or Juan Pierre. Like I said, it's like just bounce it in the ground and run.
Yeah. Like there's a little bit to the mechanics where I think to myself, like, the old leadoff hitter swing like Shohei Ohtani has. Like some people, some people can make that away where their hands are way away from their body, but McGonigal is in tight and he can create all those different angles, a little bit like Wenzel Perez does a lot, like where he's not just like swinging down at something. He can make the adjustments with his body to get there and still leverage the pitch into the outfield on a line. Max Clark kind of like once he commits, he's just sort of dragging the bat, with his right hand and spinning out. But I assume they're going to work on this and he's going to get stronger. And it is year one, but again, it's that scrutiny from being that high a pick where you just like the Tigers took a chance on long-term upside here, and I'm sure we all still prefer Wyatt Langford and whatever, despite how some struggles from him and whatever. But I mean, it's just going to take some time. But I don't think Max Clark really looks like he's going to hit for any power, and I don't think that swing is is going to hold up over time. But I also think he's just going to get stronger and make some adjustments, learn to pull the knob through and keep his momentum going through the strike zone with better extension toward the pitcher, all that stuff, and not pull off. And probably will learn to drive the ball, but it's still probably going to be more like gap power ish type of a player. So,
yep.
I put my top 30 together. I just wanted to show how like this all came about. And so, Oh, apparently my wife has dealt cards to Brett Butler. He was mad that I knew who he was and left my table. It was
Very funny.
I'll hear about that story later. That's pretty funny.
He's trying to be incognito there. Yeah.
Yeah, it's like you're not fooling anybody, Brett Butler. You also had a really gravelly voice too, as I recall. But anyway,
Damn it, these
just
people
like,
won't ever leave me alone. I can't go out in peace.
I'm the great Brett Butler. Jeez, not to be confused with the comedian who went broke in her career. But anyway.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. No, but I was looking at the top 30. Like I said, my list is a little different than everybody else's, and that's what I liked about the secret behind the sauce a little bit. I love catchers apparently because I had Alfonso, I had Bennett Lee in there. I just threw everybody in the mixer because why not? But yeah, as far as Clark goes, I have him at 3. Young, the power upside, the ability to, I don't know, like the contact is why I had him just over Clark. There's a lot to be up, you're right. There's a lot to be like about Clark and what have you, but that's just wanted to kind of go into how all of us come to our determinations with that. So,
and then we got to speak about Enrique Jimenez, who's the other. Is he a catcher, guys? Help me.
Well, he's more built like a catcher than Briseño. He's like 5'9", 5'10", and bowling ballish. But he's splitting time between catching and first base as the most of the young guys do.
Yeah.
Yeah. There's the So by the way, we're talking about Framir Montalvo, who I think is injured. We're not sure what's going on with him. But Blake Dickerson was the pitcher that came over to the San Diego deal. Still haven't a lot of video on him as of yet, but Paul Wilson, Chris and I had a really funny discussion about Paul Wilson today, about his breaking balls and a little bit of his command issues. Good to see Pedro Garcia figure it out back in the complex league after struggling in Lakeland. But Annabelle Salas, correct me if I'm wrong, Chris. This is his first year.
Yeah. Yeah, he was part of the same class with Jimenez, and he was one of the names that was kind of popping. And then he had a really good DSL season with power, with speed, walked a ton. There was a little bit, some strikeouts there too. So you're wondering if it's another Raylan Perez, but just watching him a couple games already, I like the swing. He looks more like a future right fielder than a center fielder to me. So that's, adjust your expectations there, but he wouldn't shock me if he's kind of this year's in a certain regard, like this year's Briseño, right? Like the guy who performs in the plus league and people start knowing. Not necessarily going to end up being a top 15 prospect, but yeah, like I said, I like the way the swing looks.
Yeah, Mark was a fan of Reiner Castillo, so that was actually good to see, and not because of the namesake of the last name, of course, but that does benefit.
Castillo and Burhan were the two guys that I had in my top 30 who did not make our consensus top 30. And again, it's just because I look at it and I go, okay, well, he's 19. He's the same age as Wilson and Dickerson, who we have in there. And Castillo is throwing 95, 96 with that. We looked at him last week. Like, I think there's enough there to treat him like a top 30 prospect.
So Sean wanted to know about the DSL, the Dominican Summer League. Do they play against other MLB DSL squads, or they split squad type games against each other? They do play against other MLB DSL teams. So
kind of just sort of like the complex league, but yeah. But
a lot more raw.
He's both right. He's both right because they have two DSL teams and they will often play. They play each other.
Yeah, that's fair.
There have been a couple times where it was like, "Hey, he finally pitched well." I was like, "Oh, the other Tigers team."
Ooh, he carved up our guys.
Yeah. Or like, "Oh, look at this! He had 4 hits." I was like, "Oh, all right, well." But yeah, they're all kind of in like pods down there, if you will. So I think they tend to play kind of like in the FCL, where they like the Tigers. FCL, they're always playing basically the Yankees, Blue Jays, Phillies. That's basically it. Yeah. And it's the same way in the DSL. I think I'm trying to remember who they tend to play the Pirates, I think. I don't know. It's been
Pirates a lot. Yeah, Pirates, and I think the Yankees. No, maybe I can't remember. It was the Yankees or
I think they do play the Yankees quite a bit too, but I don't know. I haven't really looked at it in a while. And I'm not really sure like the location type thing, but yeah, I mean, it just seems like it's just a proximity situation.
Stan wants to know how the construction of the complex league. There's not been a lot leaked about that at all because when it comes to the Dominican, there's there's safety protocols for a reason because of some of the interesting issues they have down there with it, just in terms of just like safety for the players, safety for personnel kind of thing. Not necessarily personnel per se, but for the player safety.
Yeah,
So-
they had an incident last year, and
Yeah.
it doesn't sound like they're under construction. I mean, last we heard they bought the property and were planning, but I don't know if they've actually broken ground yet. Maybe you guys heard that, but
No, I haven't.
Yeah, I don't. I haven't. You know,
I think
you
this is
see
probably still a year or two out at least. You know.
Yeah.
So I'm looking at they're in the DSL. They're in the San Pedro division. So it's 2 Pirates teams, 2 Tigers teams, 2 Red Sox teams, and 2 Cubs teams.
Oh, the Cubs. Okay, yeah.
Okay.
And they may play other teams, but I do think they mostly stick around with the same. So
Yeah, when you have that, when you play that pod mentality, I mean, the games usually start at 10 or 11 in the morning, which usually the case is. For example, the FSL Tigers play the Phillies on this YouTube channel that's usually on when I'm working. It's just on my other screen when it's on. So it's cool to see. I mean, the team is off to a really good start, and the DSL doesn't start till I believe the 5th of June. So we still have another week and a half or so, correct?
I believe so. Yeah.
Something like that. Yeah, something like to that effect. So
I mean,
all right,
the thing I think when I look at that is just like how many guys in the FCL I actually am interested in compared to any other year ever. And then, you know, I think that's a good sign. Like a couple of them are injured, you know, like Jack Diaz and Carson Brucker, who we mentioned earlier. We'd like to see those guys. But yeah, Enrique Jimenez, Blake Dickerson, Paul Wilson, you know, Rainier Castillo, Ranier Vermontia. This, you know,
but,
8 or 9 guys that I actually want to see. So that's a pretty good sign. Although maybe you just expect that when they draft that many prep guys. But there's also a decent IFA class that they signed last year, and some of those guys will be working in here. So.
Yeah, and even Jonathan Rogers, who was kind of the forgotten prep player last year. I think they took him in the 19th round or 20th round.
Yeah,
and he had a 4 scoreless in his first outing and was through 1 scoreless in his second outing before Lightning stopped the game. So he's a guy I'd be interested to see what he's throwing these days. So yeah,
and
a lot of
Dunford's down there, right?
Yeah, although I think he's on the IL. He had a really
Right.
rough first outing and then on the IL. So I don't know what's going on there.
Yeah.
Yeah, as far as that goes too, with in terms of even like players kind of injuries and those updates are very rare. So
Yeah.
unless we heard for something like, for example, I will say we've been getting a couple of pictures from Terry Newmar, who is part of she's Tiger minor league tracker now officially. Gets out of that, and so she's been posting pictures every day. And so usually if there's some sort of injury or something like that, it'll just say, "Oh, this X player wasn't here today" or whatever. So we gotta give a shout out to Terry for that. She does a really good job with being on top of those players and knowing and making some really good relationships too. I remember at the barbecue this year, a lot of players came up to her and saying hi to her and what have you. She missed part of last season with the knee surgery, so. But yeah, she really does connect with those players, and she has like kind of insight where she's not stalking their Instagrams or whatever the case is. And I don't know about that. Like there's the people like when you wishing a player happy birthday. I mean, cool. I don't know. I just don't. I like the idea of stalking somebody's Instagram to see if they're taking. It's just I don't know, just weird.
It's just especially awkward when they're like 17, 18, 19, 20. You know, like if a dude is like a an upper level prospect. I feel less concerned and like more like they should know what they're doing by now. But yeah, I don't want to, I mean, Max Clark does what he does on Instagram. I don't care. I'm not paying any attention to most of that.
I think it's also just our age, right? Like if we were in our early 20s or whatever, I'd be like, that's fine. I'll check to see what my fellow youths are doing.
Right.
Yeah, but sometimes the fellow youths, like, unfortunately, when I hear that, it's like, but usually the people that checking on their local fellow youths are not the same age. It's just I don't know. Like it's
yeah. I mean, it's awkward. I mean, the whole sport is awkward in that age because there's so many people trying to exploit them in other ways, and I mean, baseball is like all big pro sports. Baseball is something of a dirty business. I just don't want to make it any dirtier, and I don't want to be spending a whole ton of time on teenagers' Instagrams and TikToks trying to discern stuff from the background in their bedroom.
And not to mention, I don't want to
people out there who do that, but
my algorithms and the FBI going, what is he doing all of a sudden? Like just but as Sean, as far as getting Emily on the show, I'm not sure how much she's doing prospect wise these days. Emily was a 6-time guest. We've asked her on a couple times, and I don't know.
Yeah, but we've had her, like tons of times on the. I don't know if it was on the minor league show, maybe way back in the day. I don't know.
Yeah, and then a regular podcast.
Yeah,
We had her on rotation quite a bit, and then
yeah, I mean, life happens
Life
and
happens,
stuff
yeah.
like that. So, but yeah, we I don't know. We got our top 30. There's going to be a lot of changes to the actual scouting reports soon
Yes.
because some of those scouting reports are like a year and a half old, and they need to be refreshed. There are new pitches. There are new things we've learned about these guys, and so I'm putting together all the ones. And then I think there's at least 6 or 7 guys that we don't have scouting reports on yet because they're new to the list.
Yeah.
Callahan, I think Ham, Dickerson, all those. So yeah, be looking for those this week.
Yeah.
So
there'll be plenty of content coming out. If you want to check out Jerry's data breakdown of the Tiger contact issues, please do so. It's on our website, tigersmlreport.com. And yeah, please donate. It goes back to the show. It goes back into the site. Hopefully I will be able to hit up Erie this week. And then next, like I said, we're going to be hitting the ground pretty hard here in the next few weeks as summer starts to kick off. And we were talking about this top of the show earlier, Brandon, and I think you missed this, but today is during the broadcast, and I think Chris McCoskey tweeted this out earlier. Today, they were doing a lot of things with mental health. So again, if you're experiencing some sort of issues of loneliness, sadness, or being overwhelmed, you're not alone. You can text MLB to 741-741 to reach a volunteer crisis counselor at the crisis text line, or you can connect via chat at crisistextline.org. As somebody who has suffered from depression, myself, I always struggle with that. It's important. You're not alone out there. You can talk to somebody, and there's always somebody to talk to. So please take advantage of those resources. They're there for a reason. And there's certain things like cancer and stuff like that that they're close, near and dear to me. But the mental health thing is so important. So important.
Don't leave yourself suffering out there. These things can be treated, they can be dealt with. You don't necessarily need drugs. Sometimes it's coping skills, all those sorts of things. But what you do need to do is take it seriously with yourself. When you're going through this, and look for help and try to find better solutions for yourself. Because it will get better if you do that. It will.
Yeah,
for sure.
Trust me, it does get better. So for myself, Brandon, and Chris, we'll see you guys on Thursday for the Motor City Metrics podcast. The episode from yesterday will be up tomorrow. Like I said, just Sundays I can't do Sunday shows. I can't. It's so hard, especially because after bowling, I'm just like, man, I don't. I just bowled I bowled a 189, and then I came back and bowled 2 123s, and so. But on that note, we'll see you Thursday. Have a great week, everybody.
Night, everyone.